The following transmission has been encrypted to protect you, the listener, and the transmitter. Please destroy upon listening. Here's the leader of your underground, Chris Butler.
Chris Butler is our leader. How you doing there, Chris?
Good, Rob. How are you?
Good. Welcome to another edition of Free Market Underground, talking about the world of finance. I think first and foremost, we talked last week about the stock market, how nuts that was, and how this week is the same way. What's going on, man?
Well, at least this week, the nuttiness is in the green.
Okay.
Whereas the nuttiness last week was in the red.
Yeah.
But there is a lot going on here that I don't think we're going to know what the answer is until probably weeks in advance here. I do know that someone has suggested that it has a lot to do with manipulation of VIX, or the volatility contract. No need to get in those weeds, but understand this. That there are some people out there that have been pushing this market around, but not for the last couple of weeks, for the last couple of years.
Well, there obviously has been a lot of manipulation with the stock market just to make the last 8 years of the Obama administration look better than it really was.
I would not argue the point.
You've got 8 years of artificially low interest rates, which is just, I don't know a whole lot about this, but to me, it's just like, that's just manipulation 101. You just keep money cheap.
Right.
And
legal manipulation.
Yeah, legal manipulation. And then also just pumping money into the stock market, the Fed pumping money into the stock market.
Right.
All of these things just cause things to be not hyper valued, just above water, to be quite honest, to some degree. Although it went up pretty dramatically. But and then now once we've got all of that, administration behind us, we got these tax cuts. I think there was an over exuberance, perhaps, in the first year of the administration, and maybe it's starting to just kind of stabilize a little bit. I don't know.
And keep this in mind too, Rob, that when people look at that stock market and they look at how much has been lost, you go back to December. Most people can remember December.
Yeah,
it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So not that much damage has been done. That wasn't what freaked people out. It was the speed of the move.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I mean, usually at the top of a market, you get some kind of leveling off and some attempt to make a new high that fails, and then you go into a bear market. This went down 10%, correction territory, 10%. What in a week?
Yeah, but it wasn't necessarily the percentage-wise the big drop. It was just a big number because you're dropping from a high number.
Right.
So percentage-wise, it wasn't one of the biggest drops. It was big, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it wasn't devastating compared to the percentage of what it was at.
Right.
All right.
And I think you also have to make mention, and we would be remiss if we didn't, make mention of the fact that, it's irresponsible of news creators to perpetuate the headline, third largest point drop in the Dow ever. That's true. But as a percentage, it's dirt.
That's exactly what I thought.
It means nothing percentage-wise. I think it was the 33rd biggest one-week move ever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that loses some of its headline sting.
Yeah, exactly.
But so we should mention that a lot of this was kind of fear pandering, but in a sense, too, look, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I myself have never seen the market move that way.
No.
And I'm not talking about just the point total down. I'm talking about the way it got there, the herky-jerky 100, 150-point moves.
Yeah, it was pretty large. Okay. Now, I obviously saw the same headline you did today. Feds collect record taxes in the first month under the tax cut. Yeah. Proving, once again, ladies and gentlemen, and anybody on the left, they will tell you it doesn't make any sense, but it does. Whenever you cut taxes, revenue to the government goes up. Why is that? There are a lot of different reasons, Chris.
Right. But first and foremost is that you grow the economy, and that's kind of code for you're growing the tax base.
Yes.
When there's more of a tax base to tax, you make more tax revenue. And I think one of the things I've been very careful of telling people is I don't expect the economy to grow because of these tax cuts, because a whole lot of bad policy can get in the way.
Yeah.
But without this tax cut, it would be worse with bad policy, right? So at the very least, it's going to be better than it would otherwise, and it has to be. This isn't speculation. It's logic, and it is a law of economics. The economy will be better off rather than not having these tax cuts with the tax cut.
Well, you think about this. You've got the Obamacare mandate. The 29ers and the 49ers are finally getting full-time work. Okay.
Yeah.
You've got that. You've got more people in the workforce. 2 million people fewer in the month of January on food stamps. Those are people back on the payroll again. Payroll taxes, all the other sundry taxes, rather than money just going out towards food stamps.
Right.
All of these things are going to have a gigantic effect on the economy.
And yet we want to increase that program.
Do they really?
Yeah, they do.
I was looking at it today. I thought they were cutting it.
Oh, I hope they do, because that I had heard last week that last minute budget deal or funding deal included an increase, and I hope I heard that wrong, because there are fewer people on the food stamp program. Thankfully, that's good news.
There have been some pretty dramatic cuts in government spending. I mean, legitimate cuts in government spending. Yeah, Trump wants to cut back on food stamps for the poor and substitute with packaged food deliveries. This is an interesting thing, because what they're going to do is do like all of these food delivery systems. You get the meals at home. My wife tried this for a while. Blue something or other.
Apron.
Blue Apron. I didn't like it because I'm a better cook.
And you're a foodie.
And I'm better. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the restriction of it. I don't like when I cook. Whatever. It was like too stringent for me. It's like, follow the directions and add this. I'm like, no, shut up.
That sounds just like the foodie response should be.
Yes. I'm not going to cook. I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah. I do things my way. And there's always got to be a lot of flexibility with the foodie too. You have to be able to change things up.
But this is a thing where you are, instead of just giving somebody a Visa card, to go to the grocery store and just buy crap.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. Listen, when I was in Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland, I'd go to Sam's Club towards the end of the month, and you could tell who the food stamp recipients were, because they were dogpiling those carts with everything.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
Sweet cereal and soda and all this stuff. And this would say, okay, no, you know what? You can design your menus. You can order from the things here.
Right.
But you ain't going to go up there and get Cheetos.
I mean, that program is probably the worst Big Brother ever. Yeah. The Big Brother that forces you to get fat and unhealthy. Here is a card, buy whatever you want to with it, where if we were really doing these folks a favor, and we are by giving them access to food and necessities, you would think they would draw the line on what's acceptable and what's not. And I know you get into all sorts of
there's so much minutia when you've got in a grocery store tens of thousands of items, Chris.
Right.
You know what it's like. I mean,
sure.
And so it's easier just to say, okay, maybe we partner with Blue Apron.
Right.
Whatever,
And that's the crux of Trump's proposal, is to kind of restrict some of the abuses. And I don't mean monetary abuse, but calorie abuse probably, or at least health abuse.
Well, I back to the collecting record revenues. January, the first month under the new tax law, Treasury brought in approximately $361 billion total tax revenue. I don't want to get into the minutia on the numbers, but it ran a surplus of $49 billion.
Yeah. Got $50 billion over. That's nice. And the thing is, though, Rob, and here's what's scary about that: we can do that on a monthly basis. We really can, and have a $500 billion surplus at the end of the year. But it's not going to happen, because surpluses can't. We just can't have them. And it will be spent in one way, shape, or form.
I do believe back in the 90s, it was like circa 96, we got a federal check. We got $600 back from the federal government.
Yeah,
I remember that. Mm-hmm. And the state of Minnesota, I think I also got $300 back, because we were running a surplus on both of those. So that was a one-time thing,
right?
But it has happened before.
It is not without precedent.
No. Some other things that are going on. The record number of U.S. small business owners say it's a good time to expand. Right. That's good news.
You don't really understand just how good a news that is unless you put it into historical context. The number of people that said that this is a good time to expand your business is better than any period prior, going back to 1986 where we have monthly numbers.
Love it.
Going back to the 70s with quarterly numbers. This is huge. And the actual index, the Small Business Optimism Index, is just a hair shy of the record set in November, and we're just a hair shy of that. That too goes all the way back to 1986.
Well, you look at again the Obama mandate. 49ers, 49ers. 49ers kept businesses under 50 employees.
All right.
There were businesses. I knew a barbecue place in Washington D.C. area. He kept it at 49 employees. They weren't going to raise it. They kept employees at 29 hours, and people were going to have. They had 2 jobs. All this stuff. They're also rolling back Obama's the food FDA rules with, like, for instance, the pizza joints would have to have catalogs with the ingredients and what the calorie was on the pizza. And they said, this is impossible.
Right.
You've got a quintillion of different ways you could combine this pizza at Domino's. So they're getting rid of that. I think all of this is, and you can't say enough about deregulation.
No, you can't. In fact, you've brought up a very good point, Rob, as you always do.
Well, thank you.
And that is
smarter than I look.
Yes, you are. I mean, how many combinations of ingredients on a pizza are there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not many.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you got your pepperoni, your cheese, your crust. You're talking about hundreds of ingredients tops. Now think about what we did to banks.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
And so you roll back some of that.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, only it was so onerous on banks, the regulations of the last era, that we hired. I mean, it was kind of like the CPA Employment Assurance Act.
Yeah.
And you had entire wings at banks that didn't exist, employing hundreds of accountants and regulators and compliance officers, I should say, just to stay in line with those regs. Peel them back and let banks operate freely. Let pizza joints operate freely.
Yeah, because you look at this, Chris. It's like lottery numbers. You think, man, every week somebody should win the Powerball. But no, you've got hundreds and hundreds of millions of tickets being sold. Only one possibility. You look at the number of ingredients. Okay, I'm going to have a large double pepperoni, banana peppers, tomatoes, blah blah blah. All of and that's a separate fat content calorie thing. And then literally millions of combinations.
Yeah,
and it's idiocy. It's idiocy by the federal government.
Absolutely.
It has to be, that has to have people breathing a sigh of relief. I think more than just about anything, the deregulation thing. I was looking for the cuts in the budget here. I have some pretty good news. The only real, there were a lot of places in government spending that are being cut pretty dramatically. Increases to the VA, increases to the military, increases to Homeland Security, cuts on a lot of other programs. I'll look for that in the meantime.
But the 800-pound gorilla, Rob, is all of the entitlement programs, which I'm not even asking that we reform entitlement spending. What I am asking for is some date in the future where we're going to address this. Just tell me that we're going to sit down and talk about the fact that we can't afford the entitlements that we have. Now, that conversation is usually kind of a politician killer, and you don't want to have it. But we've got to start being realistic about the debt. We have to be realistic about the budget. And sure, we can afford a lot of these things right now. The problem is going to come in 10, 15, and 20 years. And the time to address it is not going to be in 10, 15, 20 years. The time to address it is now.
Yeah, and we remember, if you saw Rand Paul the other night, the only person standing up in the chamber as this budget was being rammed through.
Right.
And I'm honestly, I'm ashamed of a lot of people. And I'm kind of pissed off at at Rush Limbaugh, to be quite honest. The other day, he basically surrendered to this whole notion of, does it really matter the amount of debt we have anymore? And I say, bullcrap. When Barack Obama was in office and they were doubling all the debt in the history of the presidents, we were going bat crap crazy about spending. And all of a sudden, how in the hell does that happen?
Right.
It's just ridiculous.
Right. And it does matter. And here's why it matters. Aside from all of the national defense issues that a large debt load held by foreigners presents to a country, it also acts as a lodestone on that economy. Yeah. In fact, I would suggest to you that it was one of the reasons why the last 8 years before Trump were so bad. The recovery itself was historically anemic. Why was that? We saddled ourselves with a bunch of debt. Yeah. And what that does is it crowds out the private sector. sector. You need to have a much larger private sector than government, and that's impossible to do when you've got 20, 30, 40 trillion dollars of debt.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm not particularly crazy about is the amount of infrastructure spending. However, I like the way the president is going about this. Barack Obama just basically made a promise to unions at a $787 billion deal with
Thank you for bringing that up.
Deal with the devil. And it wasn't shovel ready. All it did was keep people employed at unions and keep them sending money to the unions to prop up Democrat politicians and their campaigns and all of that stuff. At least this guy, Donald Trump, has said, okay, we're going to relax EPA regulations so we don't have to take 10 effing years to build a bridge, or at least get to the point where you can break ground on a bridge with all these environmental impact studies and all this bull crap. I mean, honestly, did the Hoover Dam really wreck ecosystems? I don't know, and I don't care, and nobody misses it. But like there's a stupid butterfly. There's a butterfly. They're talking about the building the wall.
Yeah,
and a bunch of eco terrorists, whatever. They're saying that this could really impact the migration of the butterfly. Well, the freaking butterfly flies.
Yeah.
So why can't it go over the damn wall?
That is a great point.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
I guess they're thinking that wall is going to be built 1,000 feet high, and the butterflies can't reach it. I'm glad you brought up the stimulus package, Obama's $800 billion boondoggle, because that too, and right now, if you listen very closely to what the Democrat talking points are on that infrastructure spending, one of the contentions they make is that, hey, this can't be done by the private sector. Well, wait a minute. We tried public sector, and we had a $2 trillion funding gap for infrastructure back then. Guess what we have today?
What?
$2 trillion.
Yeah.
So what did it do? That was almost $1 trillion.
Well, the infrastructure creates work. It doesn't create jobs.
That's right.
And with Barack Obama, he used the analogy of, going out and digging a hole and then filling it with dirt. And that was literally what they were doing.
That's right.
Nothing got better. Nothing. 8 years later, we still got Democrats screaming, broken infrastructure. Well, screw you.
Right.
We gave you almost $1 trillion, and that was supposed to fix it. But all it was a massive union payoff.
Right.
Nothing got done.
It is no coincidence that the Egyptian kingdom fell after it spent all of those years and resources on pyramids, which is the exact same thing, Rob.
Yes.
Is digging up holes and filling them up with dirt. It does absolutely nothing. Well, at least the pyramids are tourist things today.
I think they were saying, listen, in 3,000 years, there are going to be tourists coming out to see
That's right. So it's an investment in our future.
All right. I want to mention a couple other things. I don't know if you know about this. The new budget is nixing funding for NPR and PBS.
Yeah.
Did you hear about this?
I heard it was proposed.
I think it's about time. It probably won't happen.
No, I wouldn't.
I think it's, these are, this is, when you look at $445 million, which is what the Corporation for Public Broadcasting receives from the government, you think that's small potatoes with regard to the annual budget. But if you look at $445 million to the average broadcast company, that's gigantic. That's massive. 445 billing. That puts you right up with some of the big players. And this is just going to them. You've got shows on weekends literally that are an hour long that have 30 people on the staff and a private chef. I'm not kidding.
Well, and that is an abuse of taxpayer funds, as far as I'm concerned. And those, by the way, are the abuses that you routinely see when you're not having to operate by the same constraints that the private sector is. And that's where you get abuses, because that money's coming. I mean, look at that stimulus bill. I mean, that was absolutely a giveaway, was it not? Here's some money, and are we shocked then that it didn't go to the right places?
No, we're not. And the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and NPR, they say they're non-commercial and all this. They are not non-commercial. They run plenty of commercials. They get massive endowments. They get massive advertising dollars. They do.
Right.
And they compete with the private sector, and they take money from the private sector in broadcasting. If you gave any broadcast company like Cumulus, which just filed bankruptcy, and iHeartRadio, which is right behind them. If you gave them a $445 million head start, they'd be making a massive, massive windfall.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's an unfair advantage, and it's bullcrap.
It is, and I would suggest to you that NPR would survive in a completely private sphere. They do a very good job at fundraising. I don't know why they wouldn't just use that in their fundraising pitch and say, look, our funding got cut off. We're going to need you more now than ever. And if they don't survive total privatization, some of these companies, should they exist in the first place?
Thank you very much. I mean, you have shows, that very few people listen to. There are a lot of programs. You've got massive staffing. You got I believe it was a $300 or $400 million broadcast complex, brand new in Washington D.C. for NPR. While you've got other places. I sat in a duct tape chair in Washington D.C. for 8 years.
Right.
And I have no time for it. If you want to listen to it, you pay for it.
Right.
It's like Netflix. If you want to watch it, you pay for it.
Well, that's right.
You want NPR? You know what? Give up $100 and you get a free coffee mug every year.
Let me add something to that conversation because it goes back to the infrastructure, Rob, and that is heard a former Democrat congresswoman on Fox last night suggest that the tax cuts were a waste of money because that same amount of money, if invested in infrastructure, would yield a higher return on investment.
No.
This is where she's confused, because if it was going to raise a huge return on investment, then why not turn the whole thing over to the private sector, who are the best, the most effective and most efficient exploiters of profit there is. Yeah. I can tell you this, there is not a high ROI on infrastructure, but whatever return on investment there is, the question is, why should I pay for it?
Well, Nancy Pelosi of the last administration at one time said that food stamps stimulated the economy.
That's true.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. I do.
Yeah, they keep grocery stores in business.
Yes, exactly right.
This is kind of interesting, and I'll want your opinion on it. The Trump administration pushing for federal officials to sell off, privatize, or otherwise dispose of a broad array of government assets, from Reagan National Airport to the GW Parkway, Memorial Parkway along the Potomac River. Other properties held by federal agencies across the country, and there are a lot of empty buildings in Washington, D.C. There are a lot of empty buildings in Washington, D.C. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good start.
Yeah, I do too.
I think that if they did that size of a sale to the private sector every year, we would be able to pay off our $20 trillion debt very, very quickly. And I think that ought to be, remember, and I think I've said this on your show as well, Rob, candidate Trump talked about this. Candidate Trump talked about selling off federal assets to pay off the debt. Now it looks like at least we can get this conversation going. My fear is that the proceeds will not be used to pay down the debt, but will be used to fund additional spending. Well,
I would be, I think it would be terrific to have airports like Reagan National and Dulles privatized. It takes forever for projects to get done there. When you are serving a customer and you are getting negative reviews for your airport security and all of these things, there's hell to pay. When it's just the TSA, when you can just, and a lot of times with these entitled government employees, they have an attitude. They take breaks whenever they want. They don't have to worry about losing their job because their jobs are not based on performance, which I'll get to in a second here. But there's a lot of that going on. And I hope, like, for instance, did you hear this? Trump budget aims to end automatic pay hikes for federal employees, making firings easier. Ka-boom, Chris.
No kidding.
Ka-boom.
Just like, and there are so many differences between the public and the private sphere, but that's a big one. You have to be able, as an employer, to have an incentive to work, and that's the main problem in the public sector. We have great public sector employees, don't get me wrong, but they're kind of self-motivated, self-starters,
sure,
high-character people. Not everybody's like that. In fact, most people, I think, if left to their own devices, if they're told, look, we're not going to expect much from you for 8 hours a day, just kind of hang out and do what we tell you when we tell you, but that won't be very often. What are you going to do? I mean, the natural inclination is going to be not to work that hard. I think this is an excellent idea, and it's a step in the right direction in terms of making the public sector more efficient.
Exactly. The White House is calling for abandoning across-the-board pay increases in 2019. Federal employees with a high school diploma, by the way, earn approximately 53% more than their peers in the private sector. It is unbelievable. There's a reason why. 9 of the richest top 20 counties in the country are right around Washington, D.C. So they're transitioning to a more performance-based workforce, meaning those who were not, living up to the standard and excelling and innovating. You go bye-bye.
Yeah.
You got people in the VA, you've got people they just come in, they do their time. Some of them don't even come in. I've heard stories they don't even come in, Chris.
Yeah.
Which
is good work if you can get it.
Yeah, if you can get it. I'm not that kind of person.
No,
and I am not that kind of person.
I would die of boredom.
What else do you got on the plate today there, Chris? What else? Anything else you'd like to talk about today?
Actually,
please.
Something.
I've been kind of commanding the conversation. The guy who doesn't know anything about finance over here.
You do a pretty good job. Over the years, you have, I think, taken more of an interest in it.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You got to.
I think that one of the things I wanted to make mention of is that we're going to start to hear this, I think, that because the sell-off in the stock market started with a good jobs report pushing interest rates higher, you're starting to hear even conservatives say that the tax cuts were ill-timed. It wasn't the right thing to do at the right time because now it's going to cause inflation and interest rates are going to go up and the economy is going to recess and blah, blah, blah. It's important to understand this. Inflation is prices going up broadly and in general. It's not just gas prices. It's not just pork. It's everything going up together at different speeds, but everything's going up together. That's inflation. So what does it matter if the government spends my money or I do?
Yeah. Well, also, Chris, you think about people have increased salaries. More people are working more hours. How else is the market going to respond to that? You've had to look at the rise of the dollar bin at every store. I mean, every store you go to the grocery store now, you got the clearance items. Trust me, I do all the grocery shopping. You've seen some recession era things come to grocery stores because there are a lot of people making a whole lot less.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
when the salaries go up, you're going to start see the price increases. You're going to see the apples that the Honeycrisp apples are going to be $3.99 instead of $2.99.
Which is high enough, frankly, for the Honeycrisp. That's true. I've actually noticed the increase in Honeycrisp apple prices.
They've got some serious. I'm going to tell you, at Hen House over here, they manipulate those prices because you can get it. 1 week it'll be $1.99. Yeah. Next week they'll be $3.99. It's like how the oil market used to be.
Right. Yeah. If I could find those Honeycrisp cheaper somewhere, trust me, I'd get them. But it's nonsense, Rob, to think that the tax cuts are going to cause inflation. The cause of inflation is money printing. Yeah. And if you don't like the inflation that comes with giving people more of their money back, well, then stop printing money.
Yeah.
Seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to hear this a lot, especially if interest rates continue to go up. We are going to be inundated with people saying, well, Trump shouldn't have done the tax cut. You're especially going to hear that on the left. Be sure and remind those folks, you can't have inflation without money printing, and Trump printed nothing.
Well, I think that as the economy goes, the Democrats are going to be more amiable toward a lot of Trump policies. Right now, you've got the president in many polls at 50%. You look at all of the bellwethers that we've talked about here. Home prices, kaboom.
Yeah.
You've got small business enthusiasm, all of these things. Mm-hmm. Sooner or later, this avalanche, and if you're just going to sit there and say it's Armageddon, and all the people in the country go, no, not so much. I'm actually doing better than I have in a long damn time. And a lot of people looked at their checks in January and went, holy crap. You can be negative and you can pee on their parade or whatever, but the American people know better.
And, this is going to be, and I'm no political analyst, but I just can't see how it's very helpful that in a period here over the next couple of months where people are going to start seeing more of their own money in their paychecks because the withholding rates went down. Not one Democrat voted for this tax bill. Not one. And they've got to go, some of them have to go to through the midterm election cycle here later this year. I just don't understand how that's a favorable position. I would love to know, Rob, and like I said, I'm not a political analyst, but I would love to know how that idea was sold to them behind all of the closed door meetings that the Democrats must have had where they decided, okay, we need you to not vote for this. Yeah. Did anyone mention that, well, what if it actually makes the constituent base more money and they're happier?
Yeah.
How do we handle that in 2018?
Well, you can only rage doesn't win you elections generally.
Yeah.
Rage does not win you elections. Hate doesn't win you elections. If you've got nothing to offer, and the Democrats have never had anything to offer other than the WPA 2017, 2018, 2014, all it is public works and raising the minimum wage. The operative word in that phrase is minimum. It's giving people the least. You want to talk about crumbs, Chris? We heard Nancy Pelosi talking about $1,000 bonus is crumbs to the average person. You're money. I mean, your Butler, actually. Right. He has a butler. His name's Butler. He has a butler, and he let you out of the rolls out front here. But $1,000 to you? It's still, you could buy great. Like 8 pounds of Honeycrisp apples with that.
Yeah. Maybe 6, depending on where you shop, right?
Depending on what day at him.
Yeah, that's right. What they've priced those rascally things at. I still would love to know what the economics of the Honeycrisp apple are. Because,
I don't know,
man. Groves must be burning down.
Do you know what it is? You know, it's crack. Because Honeycrisp apples are so damn good.
You're right.
They just make every other apple taste like crap.
How can you call yourself an apple lover if you're not into the Honeycrisp?
No, you know what? And you look at
and I am. I'm an apple guy.
I know. You just walk by the red delicious and the yellow delicious and the gray. You know, if they could speak, they'd be weeping because Honeycrisp over here. You know,
right?
You're paying $4 and they're telling $1.29 for the yellow apples. And you're like, screw it, and I'll pay the $4 for the honey.
You know, for your food podcast, Rob, and tell people when that is. It's Saturday, right?
Saturdays at 3:00 on Liberty One TV, also on a bunch of different associated Facebook pages, including American Journal Review.
If you are of the mind,
yes.
you ought to take your camera on the road and check out some Honeycrisp action.
Yeah.
The price, manipulation, maybe, I don't know, collusion.
They're playing with us.
Take it on the road. Yeah,
they're playing with us. It's like what gas stations used to do. What do you got? What do you got regular?
Yeah.
What do you? Okay, go ahead and jack it up.
Right,
jack it up. You know.
And in-house is always the one that's got the top price.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Because they pay more to enter the club.
All right, now do we have anything else we're going to cover today, Chris?
No, that's it.
Well, I think we got it, brother. Where can everybody find you?
They can find us at freemarketunderground.com. That's going to have all of the radio shows archived. Also at Facebook, you can go to Free Market Underground as well. And Rob and I both post a couple articles a day relative to markets, free markets, stock market. Check that out too.
All right, very good. Have a good one. We'll see you again soon, guys.
Thanks, Rob.
Please destroy all traces of the preceding message using the standard protocol. Alert all friendly parties to the existence of the underground, but only after the requisite background check. Until the next transmission, keep up the good fight.